Chapter 68 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Anna Roberts. Lorna Doone by R. D. Blackmore. Chapter 68. John is John no longer. It would be hard for me to tell the state of mind in which I lived for a long time after this. I put away from me all torment, and the thought of future cares, and the sight of difficulty, and to myself appeared, which means that I became the luckiest of lucky fellows since the world itself began. I thought not of the harvest even, nor of the men who would get their wages without having earned them, nor of my mother's anxiety and worry about John Fry's great fatness, which was growing upon him, and how she would cry 50 times in a day, "Ah, if our John would only come home, how different everything would look." Although there were no soldiers now quartered at Plover's Barrows, all being busied in harassing the country, and hanging the people where the rebellion had thriven most, my mother, having received from me a message containing my place of abode, contrived to send me, by the pack-horses, as fine a mound as need be of provisions, and money, and other comforts. Therein I found addressed to Colonel Jeremiah Stickles, in Lizzie's best handwriting, half a side of the dried deer's flesh, in which he rejoiced so greatly. Also for Lorna a fine green goose, with a little salt towards the tail, and new laid eggs inside it, as well as a bottle of brandied cherries, and 7, or it may have been 8 pounds of fresh home-made butter. Moreover, to myself there was a letter full of good advice, excellently well expressed, and would have been of the greatest value, if I had cared to read it. But I read all about the farm affairs, and the man who had offered himself to our Betty for the 5 pounds in her stocking, as well as the antics of Sally Snow, and how she had almost thrown herself at Parson Bowden's head, old enough to be her grandfather, because on the Sunday after the hanging of a Countisbury man, he had preached a beautiful sermon about Christian love, which Lizzie, with her sharp eyes, found to be the work of good Bishop Ken. Also I read that the Doones were quiet, the parishes round about having united to feed them well through the harvest time, so that after the day's hard work the farmers might go to bed at night. And this plan had been found to answer well, and to save much trouble on both sides, so that everybody wondered it had not been done before. But Lizzie thought that the Doones could hardly be expected much longer to put up with it, and probably would not have done so now, but for little adversity, to wit, that the famous Colonel Kirke had, in the most outrageous manner, hanged no less than 6 of them, who were captured among the rebels. For he said that men of their rank and breeding, and above all of their religion, should have known better than to join ploughboys and carters and pickaxemen against our Lord the King and his Holiness the Pope. This hanging of so many Doones caused some indignation among people who were used to them, and it seemed for a while to check the rest from any spirit of enterprise. Moreover, I found from this same letter, which was pinned upon the knuckle of a leg of mutton for fear of being lost in straw, that good Tom Faggus was at home again, and nearly cured of his dreadful wound, but intended to go to war no more, only to mind his family. And it grieved him more than anything he ever could have imagined, that his duty to his family, and the strong power of his conscience, so totally forbade him to come up and see after me. For now his design was to lead a new life, and be in charity with all men. Many better men than he had been hanged, he saw no cause to doubt, but by the grace of God he hoped himself to cheat the gallows. There was no further news of moment in this very clever letter, except that the price of horses' shoes was gone up again, though already 2 pence farthing each, and that Betty had broken her lover's head with a stocking full of money, and then in the corner it was written that the distinguished man of war and worshipful scholar, Master Bloxham, was now promoted to take the tolls, and catch all the rebels around our part. Lorna was greatly pleased with the goose, and the butter, and the brandied cherries, and the Earl Brandir himself declared that he never tasted better than those last, and would beg the young man from the country to procure him instructions for making them. This nobleman, being as deaf as a post, and of a very solid mind, could never be brought to understand the nature of my thoughts towards Lorna. He looked upon me as an excellent youth who had rescued the maiden from the Doones, whom he cordially detested, and learning that I had thrown 2 of them out of window, as the story was told him, he patted me on the back, and declared that his doors would ever be open to me, and that I could not come too often. I thought this very kind of his lordship, especially as it enabled me to see my darling Lorna, not indeed as often as I wished, but at any rate very frequently, and as many times as modesty, my ever-leading principle, would in common conscience approve of. And I made up my mind that if ever I could help Earl Brandir, it would be, as we say when with brandy and water, the proudest moment of my life, when I could fulfill the pledge. And I soon was able to help Lord Brandir, as I think, in two different ways. First of all, as regarded his mind, and then as concerned his body; and the latter perhaps was the greatest service, at his time of life. But not to be too nice about that, let me tell how these things were. Lorna said to me one day, being in a state of excitement, whereto she was over-prone, when reft of my slowness to steady her, "I will tell him, John. I must tell him, John. It is mean of me to conceal it." I thought that she meant all about our love, which we had endeavoured thrice to drill into his fine old ears, but could not make him comprehend without risk of bringing the house down; and so I said, "By all means, darling, have another try at it." Lorna, however, looked at me, for her eyes told more than tongue, as much as to say, "Well, you are a stupid. We agreed to let that subject rest." And then she saw that I was vexed at my own want of quickness, and so she spoke very kindly. "I meant about his poor son, dearest, the son of his old age almost, whose loss threw him into that dreadful cold, for he went without hat to look for him, which ended in his losing the use of his dear old ears. I believe if we could only get him to Plover's Barrows for a month, he would be able to hear again. And look at his age. He is not much over 70, John, you know, and I hope that you will be able to hear me, long after you are 70, John." "Well," said I, "God settles that. Or at any rate he leaves us time to think about those questions when we are over 50. Now let me know what you want, Lorna. The idea of my being 70! But you would still be beautiful." "To the one who loves me," she answered, trying to make wrinkles in her pure bright forehead. "But if you will have common sense, as you always will, John, whether I wish it or otherwise, I want to know whether I am bound, in honour and in conscience, to tell my dear and good old uncle what I know about his son." "First, let me understand quite clearly," said I, never being in a hurry, except when passion moves me, "what his lordship thinks at present, and how far his mind is urged with sorrow and anxiety." This was not the first time we had spoken of the matter. "Why, you know, John, well enough," she answered, wondering at my coolness, "that my poor uncle still believes that his one beloved son will come to light and live again. He has made all arrangements accordingly; all his property is settled on that supposition. He knows that young Alan always was what he called a feckless ne'er-do-well; but he loves him all the more for that. He cannot believe that he will die without his son coming back to him; and he always has a bedroom ready, and a bottle of Alan's favourite wine cool from out the cellar. He has made me work him a pair of slippers from the size of a mouldy boot; and if he hears of a new tobacco, much as he hates the smell of it, he will go to the other end of London to get some for Alan. Now you know how deaf he is; but if any one say 'Alan,' even in the place outside the door, he will make his courteous bow to the very highest visitor, and be out there in a moment, and search the entire passage, and yet let no one know it." "It is a piteous thing," I said, for Lorna's eyes were full of tears. "And he means me to marry him. It is the pet scheme of his life. I am to grow more beautiful, and more highly taught and graceful, until it pleases Alan to come back and demand me. Can you understand this matter, John, or do you think my uncle's mad?" "Lorna, I should be mad myself to call any other man mad for hoping." "Then what will you tell me to do? It makes me very sorrowful, for I know that Alan Brandir lies below the sod in Doone Valley." "And if you tell his father," I answered softly but clearly, "in a few weeks he will lie below the sod in London, at least if there is any." "Perhaps you are right, John," she replied. "To lose hope must be a dreadful thing, when one is turned of 70. Therefore I will never tell him." The other way in which I managed to help the good Earl Brandir was of less true moment to him; but as he could not know of the first, this was the one which moved him. And it happened pretty much as follows, though I hardly like to tell, because it advanced me to such a height as I myself was giddy at, and which all my friends resented greatly, save those of my own family, and even now are sometimes bitter, in spite of all my humility. Now this is a matter of history, because the King was concerned in it; and being so strongly misunderstood, especially in my own neighbourhood, I will overcome, so far as I can, my diffidence in telling it. The good Earl Brandir was a man of the noblest charity. True charity begins at home, and so did his, and was afraid of losing the way if it went abroad. So this good nobleman kept his money in a handsome pewter box, with his coat of arms upon it, and a double lid and locks. Moreover, there was a heavy chain fixed to a staple in the wall, so that none might carry off the pewter with the gold inside of it. Lorna told me the box was full, for she had seen him go to it, and she often thought that it would be nice